Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
Of course, I insist that legally that was not the right decision. I mean, from so many perspectives, especially when she was the returning officer for the presidential election with certain constitutional responsibilities, and she had put forward certain figures in a public statement. Then later, the PRO changes the figures, and then more changes come when they file their papers in court. So up till now, we don't really know what the right figures for that election, were. So definitely, the opportunity for her to come and testify. And by the way, she had sworn an affidavit before the court indicating that she would testify. The affidavit was sworn because she was put forward as a witness for the Electoral Commission, and the indication in the affidavit was that she would testify. So, I mean, from every point of view, the decision not to have her testify is very hard to justify. But, I think that you also have to recognize sometimes that people want to protect, their side. And so if they felt that they needed to protect her and, they therefore kept her away from being cross-examined by me. It's not so much the being cross-examined by me that's important, actually. It is more the fact that she was not able to come and testify as to the exact figures which represented the results of the presidential election. And she, as a returning officer, owed a constitutional duty to the people of Ghana to do that. And to this day, we don't know the figures because they kept changing, as you know.
Right. I mean, absolutely. But do you feel that the whole case hinged on this happening? Do you think that it was...
Well, the whole case was certainly about her exercise of her constitutional role. That exercise required her to do certain things, to be involved in the collation, to be there as part of the collation. But for much of the day, as you know, she wasn't even there in the premises of the Electoral Commission. So she couldn't have been involved. It was also important that she should have documented the figures on the basis of which she was acting. And so if she announces certain figures in a public televised broadcast, and then, from the day after, those figures start changing, and we point out that based on those figures, she should not have declared, a president based on those figures, because those figures, when you examine them, would not lead to the outright 50% plus one statement that she made. So really, everything did hinge on her role, her performance of her constitutional role.
Right.
And, sadly, she was not allowed to come and, express exactly what she did. And when that happens, of course, then it makes people kind of suspicious about who really was the one who put forward the figures that were eventually published and gazetted and so on. Because the person who made the public broadcast never really vouched for any of the changing figures that were subsequently put on the website of the Electoral Commission. So that's a problem. But, in many ways, I think President Mahama should thank God that he wasn't announced as the victor, or there wasn't a runoff which he would have won, because when you look at where we are as a country, I think that it would be challenging for anybody to be president in this situation. So again, I mean, somebody asked about my quoting the Bible and so on. That the particular thing that I quoted, I think the last statement that I made, they sow the wind and they shall reap the whirlwind. Again, it was a kind of inspired recall of that particular passage from Hosea during that period. And it kept, coming to me. It was on my mind, it was on my heart, as I was preparing for, those last days. And again, when I think back on it, it seems to have been somewhat prophetic, even though I don't call myself a prophet.
Should we work on that?
Because unfortunately, the whirlwind,
right.
we seem to have been experiencing quite a whirlwind.
Absolutely. And at this point, I'd like to say thank you to my Wofa KSM. He's allowed us to steal a few of his time, because this is his time. But, I have the best Wofas in the world.
I know.
So he's given
the best dads as well.
He's giving me permission to take a little of his time. So I will ask you two current affairs questions, just two, because I can't take too much. I can't be Oliver Twisted, But so my first question would be about the law school, and everybody who loves the law in Ghana and wants to study the law has questions about how our law school seems to be so elitist. Permit me. I had the director of the law school himself here, I think a week or two ago, and we had this conversation, and he shared some very, his views. And he says that, no, we are not trying to prevent anybody from coming in. And that's great. But there are numbers and numbers, hundreds, in the hundreds of thousands of people who would have loved to, study the law, who have just been
cut off.
That's
Unfortunately, I think that we have that experience as a reality. We can't run away from it. The large numbers are not necessarily excluded because they have failed the exam or because they really didn't meet the pass mark or whatever. But it seems like sometimes, statements are made that we can't have law as a sort of mass profession, and I get a bit worried about those sorts of statements because, frankly, if the whole Ghanaian population were legally educated, that would actually be a good thing. It would maybe help for a better understanding of responsibilities and duties of citizens as well as rights and so on, of everybody, including, people in powerful positions and so on. But I think, the concern that I have in terms of a lot of people wanting to go into the law school, go into the legal profession, arises from the fact that whenever I meet people, young people come to me and they say, I watched you on television and I also wanted to be a lawyer. It actually saddens me, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel that having just lawyers on television and having our profession put forward as a model for young people is actually the wrong thing for a country like ours. We need, a lot of other professionals, nurses, doctors, engineers, technicians in different fields. And I think that if all these roles had opportunities to be kind of modeled on television, people would watch surgeons undertake a very delicate, surgery and how they do it, and young people can then get excited. So in my mind, part of the problem is that, law has been made to look a bit too sort of fashionable in terms of people watching legal proceedings and then young people in school feeling that that's what they want to be. 2013, and maybe 2021 as well, I can't remember, but the election petition was broadcast the whole day for 7-8 months, and so people were glued to that, and young people, and that's what I'm saying I'm uncomfortable about, because I feel that it overstates the significance of one profession at the expense of so many other roles, and I do feel that you in the media ought to give equal time to so many other important, professional roles. And that itself, if that happened, then perhaps there'll be less pressure for sort of, the law schools feeling that everybody's trying to come. Now, I also think that it's a mistake to imagine that when people want to study law, they necessarily want to practice in the courts. A lot of people want to study law. They might use it in a corporate context. They might use it, just for their own, sort of personal education and so on, not necessarily to practice. And I think that what might be a better approach, to this whole business of numbers and so on, is having a little more sort of counseling of people as they go through law school, law programs and so on, in terms of the variety of ways in which they can use the law that they've studied. And truly, there are 1,001 ways. I mean, recently I met somebody who told me that he actually works as a nurse, professionally, but he's also studying law. Now, I mean, I've met people in the past who have studied both medicine and law, so, and the people remain in the medical field, but they have a law qualification, and that, they use, and maybe it helps them to avoid liability, as medical professionals or whatever. But I think if we enabled people to have a lot of counseling in terms of the range of things that, lawyers can be involved in, and it's not just about appearing in court, and that's maybe become too glamorous,
right. You can't blame us. We are looking at you. We are looking at, Mr. Tony Lita. And then there's, Madam Marietta in the mix. You can't blame us if we think that.
So we need to change that a little bit, and get some very, significant doctors and engineers and nurses and teachers. Teachers, for goodness sake, are so important to all of us. I mean, if we hadn't been taught, I remember my teachers with great, affection. I mean, from my primary school days. I can never forget, for instance, the headmaster at Accra Newtown Experimental School, Mr. Fosuapia. A very commanding presence, and some of the teachers, Miss Norte and so on, who took us through. Miss Lindsay, again, sadly, I think she died quite young, but she had just finished Wesley Girls and she came to teach us at Accra Newtown, So teachers, why don't we make teachers an important center of attention on television so that young people can aspire to teach the next generation? Why not?
Absolutely.
When I went to Infantsiri again, I had great teachers, a great headmaster, Mr. Bartels. Commanding, even though he was a slight person, but his presence, whether he was speaking Fanti or English, was just commanding.
Right. So my second question.
Yes.
Actually, I have another question now, and I'm choosing. Okay, that one. So, this week, there's been so much conversation around police brutality during protests. The truth is that it's actually quite rampant under this administration. Most of the demonstrations we've had under this administration has been characterized by violence. We could talk about the law students getting sprayed with hot water. We could go back, to what happened in some of these regions where some people actually lost their lives. And then very recently, actually yesterday, arresting everybody in sight, including journalists. What do you say about that? What are your thoughts?
No, that again takes one's mind back to, days which we thought were days of military rule, not constitutional rule. I happen to represent university students at a committee of inquiry into a shooting incident at the railway station, where Ajay Berima, a student on campus in Legon, who had been part of a group that went in, you know, to the railway station, were confronted by policemen, and in the end, one of them was shot and killed. And there was a committee of inquiry. So those were things that, you know, one would expect, you know, would be behind us, because, you know, people like to contrast constitutional rule with, you know, rule of the military. But then, unfortunately, some of the signs that we are seeing, as you rightly allude to, show that, you know, you can't have a cut and dry distinction between some of the experiences under a military regime and some of the experiences now, because some of those same old experiences are being repeated under constitutional rule. And that is what I have called in the past constitutional lawlessness. Because unfortunately, under the guise of constitutional order, you can also have even constituted authority acting in lawless ways. And that is a problem, you know, which we all need to confront, especially when we have a president who is a lawyer himself, and, you know, one would expect that he would be, you know, the last person under whose administration some of these things would happen. I mean, we have a journalist, you know, who was killed, you know, and we still don't have, you know, a solution. And again, we shouldn't just limit it to journalists and whether they are brutalized and so on. Of course, because they're journalists, it's easy for them to put out their story in the media, but there are a lot of ordinary people in various circumstances who, again, are mistreated. That's why I told you that when I met certain people in Sowed prison and heard their stories, you know, it was a new learning for me. It was a new university education, you know, for me. So these are reminders of how, as a nation, how, as a people, we still have a lot to do to ensure that constitutional order is not just, you know, something we pay lip service to. Democracy is not something that we just mouth as an, you know, part of the system, when in fact, in reality, what we do is the complete opposite.
Right. So my last question will be on family, and you come from a distinguished family, and that's, you know, family in terms of old, and the family that you yourself, you know, chose, your brother, your sister, you know, it's as if the brains, God just said take, he just dashed it, you know, at all of you. But my actual question is about your son. How did you feel when he wanted to do music?
You know, before we get to my son, we have to go to my mother, who is still alive at 98.
Wait,
and again, it's a blessing to, you know, have her still be the inspiration that she is to us. And in fact, the reason this is an important part of my answer about her children is that she is actually a better lawyer than all of us combined, you know, and she makes us know that, you know, she can't be pushed around because we think we have acquired some degrees in law. No. She does not take any of that, and she still sort of keeps us in order. And so, you know, we've gone down the generations. I mean, in my generation, we have 4 lawyers amongst the 7 of us children. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately actually, I mean, Ahmed, or Manifest as you call him, he chose a different path.
Absolutely.
Which, you know, I completely respect. And it, you know, again, it's a path in which he shows his own brilliance, his own capabilities in ways that I couldn't possibly do. I sometimes wish that I could do music a little more, but you see, in my household, my wife has a great voice. She sings in the church choir. She used to be a regular in the song group, but she still occasionally sings in church. And so, you know, it's a blessing to have people in my family, people that are close to me, who are so good in music. a field in which I'm totally lacking. And so I can just enjoy them and enjoy the blessing. You know, whilst I was in prison, again, just a last recollection, one of the things that used to just minister to me was a song which, you know, my wife and the song group used to sing in our church. I will worship you. I will lift up your name on high. Yes, you are Lord. Yes, you are. And I mean, it was a song, you know, I will worship you, that kept ringing in my ear during the time that I was in prison. And it wasn't until I came out that I found out that it was a song of Danny Nettie, our own Danny Nettie. And I was determined to meet him after I got to find out that that was his song, because it was a song that had blessed me so much. And I think it was through one of Esther's staff who was related to him that we eventually found him. And I think on my 60th birthday, he came and ministered, and it was such a blessing. I mean, I remember it as if it was yesterday. And thereafter, you know, he became very close to us. You know, he was like our son. Sometimes he would, you know, sneak into the house, and when he hears a song of his being played on a loudspeaker, he would take the phone and call Esther and say, "Mom, why are the rocks in your garden singing my song?" And that was Danny Nettie for you. You know, wonderful minister of song, and we've been blessed by people like him in our lives. You know, so we can only thank God for that.
Right. My mom. Sorry to take you back to Manifest, but my mom says his songs are, what does she say, metaphysical or?
Well, I don't think he himself would like the metaphysical, because it puts it in a sort of realm above, because I think he relates his songs to people, and he relates them through lyrics and through rhythms that attract people. You know, sometimes when I'm traveling, I'm going through, somebody in immigration says to me, you know, greet Manifest for me. I'm telling him I'm a fan of his and so on. I say, okay, I will. You know, so I mean, I think metaphysical is not quite the word. You know, again, it may be that in his trying to connect to people, you know, there's a sort of quality about the lyrics and the music. And also, I would say rather, there is sometimes a kind of intellectual message also that he's putting across that underlies some of that, you know. And I think that is also something that attracts a whole range of people.
She's teasing when she says that. I mean, I cannot say thank you enough for this opportunity. I appreciate, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to sit down with you like this. I mean, just the opportunity to know you is you know, but to get the opportunity to sit down like this with you and to speak with you and share the same space with you. Thank you. But more importantly, thank you for who you are. For who you are and for what you continue to do for all of us, the inspiration. You have no idea the number of students that were dying to meet you today, but for, you know, the rains and the traffic and all that and all the drama. What it means is that, sir, with your kind permission, you have to come again.
I'll come again on two conditions. One, we have to make sure that we don't have the audience waiting for 1 hour. That was not a great idea. Whatever the conditions outside, I don't think we did a service to the audience.
Not at all.
The second condition on which I will come is that you don't steal time from KSM, but you know, make sure that we structure the conversation to cover a lot of interesting areas. You know, I myself can think of many interesting areas, and also many interesting pictures, by the way, that you could you know, show. I saw some of the pictures of me in sort of legal uniform and so on. But there's some other interesting pictures.
Those are the ones I want. Those are the ones I want. Thank you.
You know, so with those two conditions, I will come again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But next week is your birthday.
Indeed.
Dedi kama amena Pendream TV ase. Na so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Ah nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, Pendream TV.